call the policy committee September 16th to order. You can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call, please.
Lori Hayes,
Here.
Bill McIntosh,
Here.
Crystal Vanu. Here. Jonathan Gerlach. Shannon Holmes,
Here.
Drew Mullins,
Here.
Chris Yakubowski,
Here.
Meg Bomke.
Here.
Monica Gary. Marcy Parker. Here. Robert Schneider.
Here.
Deontay Diggs. Kamala Young. David Brown.
Here.
Jason Graham. Gerald Childress. Jacob Lane. Catherine Cox. Joe Stainsby.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. As far as the approval of this September 16th policy committee agenda, we have a couple of items, just wording changes. That's all.
Chairperson, we just received two requests for wording changes. The one is for resolution 25-08. It's a tip amendment, and VDOT has just requested that we add the words on behalf of Stafford County to the resolution. We don't see there's any problem with that as staff. And the second one is FAMPO resolution 25-10. Both of these are stapled to the pack which we've provided for members. We are just withdrawing a portion of resolution 25-10, which refers to the FXB Go HVAC system. There were some errors with that document, so they've withdrawn it. So this is not adding to, it's removing from. So the revised ones are attached to your agenda. You need to see the wording, they're very minor.
Anybody have any questions about that?
Approved as amended.
Second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, motion carries.
Yep.
All right. And now we have our public hearings, resolution 2507.
This is to adopt the FY 24-27 TIP program to add a new project, UPC 120943, the Germana Point Drive extension in Spotsylvania. Madam Chair, if we have any comments.
Any comments? Anybody in the room that wants to speak to this? Do we have any comments written? Okay. Anyone have any questions, concerns?
Close the public hearing.
Yep, I guess I'll close the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and we also have, we don't have to vote on that right now.
No.
All right, we also have any public involvement? Anybody would like to speak? All right.
Mr. Watkins, welcome.
Like having you here. Thanks for coming.
Try to add a little bit if I can. Al Watkins, George Washington District, Stafford County. Regarding agenda item 9B, which is going to be the presentation, a few things to potentially consider. Later on, when what to do on slide number 9, there are some unnamed streams. The stream that is on the east side of England Run is not on any maps in Laurel Branch, so ultimately when I want to add that, that'd be fine. It also mentions on slide 9 that option A, there's a cul-de-sac listed, but I couldn't locate it on the map, so I just was wondering where that was. Regarding the PPAs, in the recent Belmont Park site plans for the rezoning that was submitted and approved for that, the stream that's adjacent to the path for option A is listed on all their drawings and plans as the PPA. So I just wondered if that could be separately checked. It also mentions that on slide number 11. Now, on slide 11, We're all familiar with the Silver Company's Neon project, which was a development that was, we learned about in December of 2023. Construction in early 24 began on the Silver Company's Celebrate Now project, so that's there on slide 11 as well. On slide 11, there's also the Silver Company's Town Celebrate, and I believe really that's just the Villas of Celebrate project, which was application 241-55521, which is for 274 duplexes on 83 acres. It's essentially the same project that Stafford's Planning Commission dealt with in 2019, when it was known as the Villages of Greenbank at that time, and did not go forward. On slide number 12, this is very important. This is a brand new project. In the last meeting that we had for the policy committee, a couple of Bell Web residents who asked about construction that was going along the Celebrate Virginia Parkway. I followed that up. I spoke about it at the supervisors meeting in Stafford on September 3rd. There's a permit that allows trees to be cleared and graded for 13.7 acres. That already now has been done and also includes the storm water basins that would be for whatever that potential new project is, which is listed as supposedly being an industrial development. Now, I mentioned before, I talked about the Silver Company's different projects, but of course, this is owned by Steubenville Capital LLC. Well, guess what? Steubenville Capital LLC has their main office in Boca Raton. It's on 101 East Telecom Drive in Boca Raton. And it just so happens that that's exactly the same address that the Silver Company
that is.
So this LLC is essentially a subsidiary of Silver.
Mr. Watkins, it's time.
Okay, that's all I have anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else have any comments? All righty,
We have comments.
you have written comments? Okay, thank you.
So our first written comment comes from Ellen Seeley as follows. I looked at the plan to add 2, maybe even 3 train lines. I am not for it. All of the locations are very close to each other. However, the citizens in Stafford County, City of Fredericksburg, would like to have transportation also. I would love a train line that I could use to go into DC. I have lived here for 3 years and have only been to DC once. I would love to go again, however, driving there is not an option. Parking there is not an option, therefore visiting is not going to be a foreseeable option. I live in a large community, Celebrate by Del Webb, and there are others here who are similarly disabled as I am, unable to drive or walk very far, but would love to visit various places. I hope my opinion counts for something. Ellen A. Swilly. Our second public comment, public involvement comment comes from Jane Leeds. Please note that I am leaving the central region of Virginia and moving to Northern Virginia, Springfield. I will no longer seek to be invited to your meetings. You may note that I was one of the very few public commentators at meetings that is over 65 years old and has dual disabilities, vision and hearing. While I am not an engineer or transportation specialist, I am an expert consumer of public transportation. I was one of the very few public advocates willing to continue to speak, ask, and try to make the stakeholders aware of the issues we face in gaining or not safe access to public transit, Amtrak, VRE, Fred Transit, etc. Nothing except a few token and meaningless projects were done during the years I served. It's truly shameful. We continue to have little or no quality of life in the central region due to their stubborn disregard that their spending directives cost taxpayers more money. That is due to their short-sighted decision-making. The central region has little or no chance of attracting business with good jobs due to the lack of a viable, meaningful, safe access to transit while cleaning up our air quality due to constant traffic congestion. Not everyone can work from home. Service jobs dictate that employees attend their jobs in person during day/hours that currently have no transportation coverage. The latter includes hospitals, public safety agencies, military service personnel, technology servicing AI, and some administrative positions. Basically, there's no chance for growth without a better and adequately designed light rail system. The chance for doing this is already being edged out by development in high-density areas that are rapidly being established locally. Plainly put, the central region is missing the boat of opportunity. I wish you well and that you will come to your senses and do more to help those who cannot get employment because they don't have keys to a vehicle or safe access to a woefully inadequate transit system. Poor people are not broken toys to be tossed aside. They are human beings who deserve equal opportunity to excel and make a living. It makes more sense to make them taxpayers than tax users. Cordially, Jane Angelo.
Thank you.
All of our public involvement comments.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, consent agenda items,
As amended.
as amended, those are the two that he talked about before. Do I have a motion? I'm sorry.
Motion to-
Okay.
Second.
Okay,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, Ian, you're up then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just ask Eugene to pull that up. This is going to be one of the shortest ones you've ever seen. So you'll be very
There's the
happy.
timer.
You'll be very You'll be very happy. Next slide. Okay, so you've seen this before. We showed you last time that we've checked again. We're still the fastest growing region in Virginia. What does that mean for our future transportation impacts of this future growth? So as we start working on the next long range transportation plan, we want to be asking that question. What does this growth mean for the transportation system? Just something to think about. Next slide. I told you last time about the new developments at the train station. Well, I took some photographs from the train to show you that the third track does in fact exist. So if you flip over to the next slide, that's the photos I took from riding inside the Amtrak train north. You can see I'm sitting in the train. On the left, you can see even people in the train. And you can see two more tracks to the right of our train. So our train is on one track and there are two additional tracks. That one furthest out to the right, that is the third track. So when people tell you none of it's been built, there's a photograph of it. It's already built, right? It's only a section, but I've done some research and collectively that's 9.2 miles of the third track that is coming together in Quantico. And the first two photographs on the left, that's actually in Stafford County. That is not in Quantico. That third track section is in Stafford County, already constructed. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the new middle platform. There were only two tracks. Now there's a third track and there's a platform between tracks 1 and 2 so that you can now access the trains from the new track via an overhead stairwell and so on so that you can get across the old track. So just a quick snapshot showing you that actually it exists. So anybody who tells you it's going to be built, well, there it is. It's already laid. That's a portion. Okay, it's only one little portion, but there's a portion of the third track already constructed in Stafford County and in Quantico. Slide. And there's my final slide, Madam Chair. Just reminding you of a couple of things that are happening. I'm calling a tip workshop for our state and local partners, just to try and cut down on the amendments. We've been getting a lot of amendments lately, and we want to, not amendments, corrections. We want to cut down on the corrections needed. The Governor's Transportation Conference is coming up in October. There are the dates, the 23rd to the 25th. I'll be representing staff at the conference. Some of you I know go to represent your jurisdictions. We have not been notified of any fall Secretary for Transportation CTB public engagements. The current pattern now seems to be that with the current Secretary for Transportation, he does a spring session, which is usually the opportunity to comment on the 6-year plan, but he seems to not be calling a fall second bite of the cherry each year. So we have not been notified that, but that seems to have been the pattern. So I'm not expecting to hear of any fall CTB public engagements in our region. FAMPO will need to adopt the new travel demand model. You're going to get a presentation on that tonight. It's finished. Yay. We've been working a year and a half with VDOT and their consultant. It's finally finished. It's got all the latest data in there. So sometimes people say they're not sure if they can trust the model. Well, this is the brand new Rolls-Royce version. It's included a whole lot of things which were not in the old model. So it is much improved, and you'll hear about that today. We will just need to ask you next policy committee meeting to vote to adopt it so that it's official. Even though it's owned by VDOT, you get asked to ratify that you're happy with it. Then the functional classification of roadways. We've asked our jurisdictions to please give us their comments by the end of this month. We have received comments from Spotsylvania and we've sent them to VDOT. We're waiting on the city and Stafford to send us any comments that they have. We only get to do this once every 10 years. So it is important that we do look at these classifications because it does in some measure affect funding. If you want to get federal funding, they want to know what the classification is of the roadway. So this does have some influence on that. We're working with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority to improve the passenger experience of using Amtrak. I had a meeting with them because we're finding that here at our stations, there's sometimes no message on the screen to tell you which platform your train is on. And you see the train pull into the station and now have to grab your suitcase,
Yeah.
run under the thing and run. I want to stop that. And there's a little bit of some reason, I'm not going to go into it. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but for some reason we have screens facing north and south on platform 2, but on platform 3, we only have screens facing north. And I think that's just stupid, frankly. The screens cost for 2 screens probably $1,000 at the very most. Why we can't just put the extra one? Anyway, so I'm fighting for those improvements. We work behind the scenes as staff to just help sort out these things, which we don't always bring to attention, but we're working on improving people's ability to access and know what's going on when they get to the train station. Also, some visually impaired people, we're trying to locate any of them that have issues and trying to put them in touch with Amtrak and with VRE so that they can get to find out which platform their train's on because they can't read the screen. So that kind of thing. And just to let you know that the staff and TAC members who are interested have been invited to a tour of the Port of Virginia with the Port Authority. They attend our TAC from time to time, and they invited us to come and have a look for ourselves to see where all the trucks come from that come through our region. So we're going to go down there in about a month and just spend the morning getting to know how it operates and how it impacts our transportation system. Dates for you and events for you to be aware of. I'm done.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we'll move on to our action discussion items, 9A, CMAQ STGB, CR prioritization methodology.
All right, thank you so much. I'm gonna let you know what FAMPO staff and TAC have been working on. We've been looking on how to divide up CMAQ, carbon reduction, and surface transportation block grant program. Can you click on this? There we go. Oh. So what we've noticed in previous rounds is that for the jurisdictions, how the funding hits and lands can be very different from year to year, and this can actually cause some challenges for jurisdictions. So in FY27, we saw that Stafford received a large pot. In the last 2 rounds, we've noticed that Spotsylvania has received a large pot, and although it breaks down to be a little bit more appropriate by jurisdictions, we're seeing a large flux year to year of how projects are being both scored and allocated funding. And that was something that we were trying to consider getting away from. So the TAC and FAMPO staff were starting to explore a process that allows a little bit more certainty going into the process, and it will allow jurisdictions to pick the priority projects rather than say, hey, the FAMPO, here's our 5 projects, let's see what sticks to the wall. And finally, we're trying to identify a data-driven formula. And so we kind of started out with 3 questions. Where people are, the basic demographics, where people are going, what are their destinations, and where are people moving through. So if you want to think about it, we're trying to find point A, point B, and the journey in between to inform our CMAQ and STB process. So demographics, we started out with the basics. We looked at population, jobs in each jurisdictions. We looked at the NPO boundaries. We also looked at, okay, what is the difference between urban and rural populations within our jurisdiction? We also started asking questions about economic activity because, surprisingly enough, that's what generates trips. So we looked at everything from, okay, where's new growth happening to sales tax being collected. And then finally, we used a lot of items from Federal Highway that looks at daily vehicle miles traveled, and they have a very useful metric. When they're looking at it, they're not asking how far does somebody say from Fredericksburg travel, or Spotsylvania. They're actually looking at even if somebody drives from Maine to Florida, and hits every single point along 95, they will count that EMT for us. So we're actually looking at how much people are driving through the region and trying to adjust for things. So it's good because we can update that information every year. So if we look at by population, you'll see that Stafford and Spotsylvania hold a very large portion, with Fredericksburg being rounded up to 9%. We looked at the urbanized population, you see that Spotsylvania actually has the largest rural population. So if we go by just the urbanized area, it drops a little bit. We start looking at jobs, you can see that Fredericksburg is actually kind of a gravitational input into the region and having a lot more jobs as compared to this population. In fact, it's close to 1-to-1 for jobs versus residents. Looking at economic activity, and surprisingly enough, Spotsylvania generates the most economic retail trips. Why is this important? Because in a lot of metrics, we look at commuting as being the prime trip area, but shopping and errands actually generates 3 times more trips. So if we want to account for that, we can't. We even have about a quarter of our trips. We can't really find the right metric to determine how do we weight social and recreational trips, but we're aware that that's a big factor. So then commuting. We started looking at how many daily vehicle miles traveled by facility mile. We're expecting that to kind of even out from the region. We're actually kind of shocked. It was much more heavily weighted in Fredericksburg, but when we started pushing it up, take that same metric and then do it by population, it started rebalancing a little bit here as well. And then finally, we were looking at, okay, how many miles of traffic does each resident have to support? And it actually works out to be close to about a third for each one of the jurisdictions. And we'll get to this later in some of the modeling later, but supporting 32, 28, and 26. This is some of the highest DMTs in the state, that alone. So that's a very high burden for each one of the jurisdictions to kind of cover. So we're having this conversation with TAC. We think we need to have a fair formula that kind of accounts for a lot of these different metrics, whether or not it's the vehicle burdens or population, jobs and sales types and retail items. We kind of need to figure out what off the top do we need to accommodate for. So we're going to have a further discussions of where how BRE for Fredericksburg going on and right fall in, and then we'll kind of start building that process into something that we can build in for CMAC STBG that isn't just throw several projects at us, have 30 projects to review and see, okay, which ones happen, because we know that there can be a lot of variability year to year with that. So complex discussion, and we're just starting.
John, just go back 2 slides. So the whole point of this is we have to find a formula to hand out the money, to put it bluntly, right? And we want it to be fair. If we were to pick population only, we as staff don't think it's going to be fair because the city is only going to get 8.6% of the money. So instead of pretending about this, let's just be frank and put it on the table so we know what we're talking about. However, the minute you look at how many vehicles are traveling and how many vehicle miles they are traveling, the city bears a disproportionate burden of the cost of roads and buses and all that because they're getting more traffic than their population. The population is only 8.6%, but the traffic is 17% using vehicle miles traveled. See, so the city's getting a bigger burden of responsibility than just their own population because we drive through the city. So therefore, we need to find a balanced metric to try and get a fair allocation of the funds that is not only population, but it also looks at the vehicles, because the vehicles are causing the traffic, and the more traffic you get, the more roadway you have to build, right? You've got to build another lane because it's now totally congested. So this is an attempt to get a fair allocation of the funding that is regular, that you can predict every month, every year, sorry. And then you don't have this fight every year about the money because you know what's coming for the next 5 years. You've got a predictable amount of CMAC and SDGD coming to your jurisdiction. You can program for it, and you as the jurisdiction can pick which projects you want to fund. It won't be FAMPO staff picking the projects. Our job will be to check that what you're doing is legal. So we will check that it has a congestion benefit, that has an air quality benefit and all that kind of thing. But we won't tell you what to do with the money anymore. We will let you as jurisdictions decide based on whatever formula is agreed. So what John is doing is showing you that we're looking at multiple options. We will bring you 2 or 3 options that we recommend, and you then will pick one. Hope it won't be an argument, but you'll pick one, and then that will be for 5 years the way that we allocate the money. And every 5 years you can review it. If you don't like it, you can adjust the formula. Done.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Yes.
Madam Chair, when you say fixed for 5 years, are you saying that the percentages would be fixed or the formula and that those percentages might change year over year at demographics? and
No.
population shifts?
We are suggesting that you don't change anything in the intervening years. That every 5 years you review it and you go, is this working for us? If it is, leave it. If it's not, you can adjust the formula, right? But we're suggesting you don't keep changing the formula because it becomes a whole game of cat and mouse. That's unnecessary, because if you think that the formula is more or less fair, you can live with it for 5 years, then you can adjust it if it gives you fair outcomes. But what we're finding now is it's a swing. 1 year Spotsylvania gets all the money. The next year Stafford gets all the money. The next year city gets some. In another year, the city gets $0, right? It's just not a good way to allocate money.
So, when do you anticipate having this whole methodology worked out and you bring it back to the policy committee?
We're going to try and keep it real simple. We're going to try and bring you, say, 3 options. In the next couple of months, it'll take us a few months to just work it through the tech and whatever. And we'll show you options that give you a bad outcome, and then 2 or 3 options that will give you a good outcome, and then you pick the one you feel is the best. It won't take long, but remember, we are not allocating CMAQ again right now, so there's no pressure.
And then I had one other, if you go to the next slide, I think it was, about the debt burden, okay. At some point, I think it would be interesting to see what is compiled in that debt burden.
It's not debt, sorry. It's the
Burden per capita,
daily vehicle miles.
oh, so it
traveled.
doesn't have anything to do with finances.
Not finance.
Okay.
It
All right.
means how many cars are taking a trip through your jurisdiction per resident.
Oh, I got you, okay, thank you.
That's why the city has the big number there. It's because for every 1 resident, they're having 10 trips, whereas in Stafford, for every 1 resident, you might have 5 trips. Still have more trips, but per person, that's a per person allocation.
But-
I don't think that one is good either. It's not realistic.
But so let me just understand. So like if somebody goes from Spotsy to Stafford, it's pinging Fredericksburg too, right?
If you go through Fredericksburg, yeah.
So if like somebody drives, let's just say
It's a-
from Richmond to DC, the mileage on 95 in Spotsylvania, 1 car going the entire, like say 18 or miles or so.
Correct.
And then it will constantly, then it'll be 4 miles on Fredericksburg and then more miles on the bottom.
So it counts the miles
Okay.
per jurisdiction of your trip
Okay, all right.
to break it down.
I'm assuming that then most of these are not 95 trips, if Fredericksburg's number is that high.
It's every single federal aid highway in the region.
Right.
So it's
So
95,
it's-
Route
it's
3,
Route
Page
3, Route 1,
Garrisonville.
yeah.
Sorry.
And remember, 95 goes through all 3 jurisdictions, so you're
Right.
all getting a portion of that trip. It doesn't make a
Right.
huge difference.
It's more the local trips that
Local
that are
trips that are vastly-
skewing that number higher.
So I'm curious if you took out 95, what would it look like?
I don't know if we can.
Have that data, we can.
I'm just curious.
We can do it.
Have the 95 data later in
I
the.
think it would
Yeah, I'd like to
take
I
out,
think that'd be something interesting. Okay,
We can do that for you.
all right.
That's
Cool.
the idea. You tell us if you want to do any other permutation, we'll do it. It'll take us a couple of months. We'll bring you back the results. You make a decision. And then we should have peace for 5 years.
We have peace now. Come on.
On CMAQ.
It's a
on
love fest
CMAQ.
here.
On
Oh,
CMAQ.
okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. All right, and we have a river crossing update.
Yes.
See, I don't interrupt my staff when they speak. I've learned.
Perfect. So I'll be giving you the update on the current River Crossing Parkway update study. Just a reminder that we're still on our alternative screening. So we are, I would like to say, definitely past the first quarter, almost to halftime right now. But we are in process and we're developing the recommendations. And what you'll kind of see is the 2 lighter purple ones as well as the blue kind of feeding into the recommendations slowly. We don't have the rental return to this. We haven't looked at this purpose in need or the traffic operations. there's an update, those are coming. So the environmental screening. Right now, we are taking a corridor that is 2.5 times wider than the actual roadway footprint. Again, so that as we go into design, they can navigate the roadway around things that are basically within that corridor. We don't want to discount anything on the edges, but we are looking at providing a much larger buffer than what the road actually impacts in order to determine what type of potential impacts it will have on the road.
I want you to understand that this is the most important slide you will see today. It doesn't look so important, but it is, because of what John just said. You need to get what he said. We're looking at a 250 feet wide corridor, but the roadway is not going to be 250 feet wide. So in other words, we're looking at the worst case scenario. So when you see the numbers for business premises that might be affected or houses that might be affected, it's the worst case scenario. What's that diagram on the right shows you is that the engineer at VDOT, who's going to make the final alignment of this roadway and bridge, will try to avoid historic resources, natural resources, houses, businesses, so you will get the best possible alignment later. So this study looks at the worst case scenario in case we need to remove houses or damage natural resources. Okay, it's very important to understand that what you will see later on in the slides is the worst case scenario, not what is likely to happen. What is likely to happen is that picture on the right. The engineer will work to try and avoid anything that is around there.
So just a reminder, we have currently 5 options. Option A, going to the far east, option B1, B2, and C coming down to Celebrate, Virginia. And finally, option D, which connects between Commerce Parkway to Green Bank and then down the peninsula there. They do include a connector option that will bring Commerce Parkway to Celebrate, Virginia for B1, B2, and C as well. They scored the impacts based on more favorable, least impact, moderate, and less favorable. They're breaking on to third, and they're compared against each other. So they'll always be the lowest and they'll always be a highest, but it's based on third. So initially we've found that conservation easements typically get a little bit worse as you move further west, with option C having the highest impact and D a little bit less. We have resource protection areas and streams and rivers. I'll come back to this in a little bit because we see slight differences. But again, we see option A and option D having a higher impact with a little bit less in the center. And then for historical battle sites and archaeology concerns, as you go further west, the impacts tend to be greater. For the rivers and streams and resource protection areas, the consultants are a little bit worried that we might be double counting here, and they're actually going back and reworking to see which one is the better impact. Because if you go on resource protection options, out of the 3 center options, option C is the least impact. But if you look at rivers and creeks, option B1 becomes the lowest impact, so they're going to come back. And what they found was, because of these 2 items overlap almost completely, that they're going to go back and revisit and bring back a better recommendation of which one carries more weight. But their concern was they're going to note both of them and then kind of start talking about what's the impacts of some of these streams, because literally the resource protection area might stop at a roadway, say Sanford Drive in some areas. So it's kind of a weird place to kind of draw the line, but that's just happens to be where that region. They've also added kind of screening for preserved open space on the city of Pittsburgh's behalf, alluding to the comprehensive plan and the small area plan. In Stafford, all these are kind of covered by the easements, they're known, but because of the preserved open spaces don't align completely with the easement, they asked for that additional layer, so they made that information known. And generally speaking, kind of in this core area as the roadway moves across, it is impacting that the most, with less impact kind of on the outer edges. And this kind of makes sense considering that they have a huge swath of preserved open area in the center. For for the development, currently, as it stands, there's generally less than an acre for most options, with the exception of option D that has about 12 acres of proposed development currently approved. Now, if you start looking at more into the proposed development, the number jumps up fair amounts, actually fairly significantly, but it doesn't really change the order all that much. We just have option D because we know that there's kind of a lot going down this peninsula, either smaller projects or larger projects that are happening that might take a chunk out of that, but we are aware of that. And there are, the consultants are continuing to basically review and wait and update this. So as new information comes along, they can plug in new numbers. They basically have that ready to go to change and update as things may become approved. We are aware of the the grading and stormwater project. Right now, it's not having an impact, but should something be formalized in that area, they'll update that as well. It could potentially impact all 5 options, so they are kind of watching that as that comes along. And finally, looking at the built environment, they've been able to go back and do a lot of reviews since the last time, working with our kind of the stakeholder committees. And what we're seeing is that all have a impact on somebody. Option A has the biggest impact for current commercial structures, mostly because of the need to realign coming down from Commerce Parkway to make that turn and keep it a through area. It is impacting one parcel, not the home. It's kind of a trapezoidal property, and so it's clipping kind of one area of to the west side of that. The consultants do think that they can move it, but they're keeping that alignment now and noting that that could be a conflict there. And then finally, we have Green Bank Road seeing a very large disproportionate things. So considering kind of how everything's lining up, you're starting to see that hopefully the environmental is starting to guide the process, where option D is showing that's probably going to have the most impact of a lot of the options. And then options B and C are kind of in the middle. Or sorry, B1 and B2 in the middle along with option A. And then option C is kind of a weird thing. It's kind of missing a lot of some of the development, but it's having a high environmental impact as well. Keep in mind, option B2 is the an option that was based on impact or stakeholder impact about moving the villas property to avoid it. So it's avoiding development. It's missing about 6 acres, but it's basically moving that impact to environmental concerns. So it's a little bit of a trade-off there. So we're going to continue on this. Again, environmental represents one impact. We're still going to go through the full NEPA thing, but the consultants were saying they're not willing to eliminate an option yet, but that's going to be based on, they want to see the traffic and operational screenings first, and then they're going to consider other items. So they're going to take community input and feedback on the next community meeting before moving forward for adoption. So again, with the modeling, it's actually gaining speed again. We've kind of solved our issues with the different versions of the software. We've updated to include the roundabout at Banks Ford and Celebrate Virginia. And the consultants are looking to have hopefully the modeling finalized by the end of October into November. So in time for our policy committee meeting in November. So you'll have that as well as our public meeting. And then we should also have updates on the Harrison Road interchange as well. We're hopefully to get that relatively soon. So based on this, they'll come back with a recommendation. They're going to provide planning level cost estimates. And what NBI really wants to do is kind of narrow the options down to maybe 2, maybe 3 if one still has legs for the public meeting. So they're basically going to say, out of those 5 options, we're going to narrow it down and listen to community and stakeholder and y'all's feedback before they actually promote a given, this is our consultant for alternative. So the good thing is there's still plenty of time for public involvement for folks to talk with the consultants and give feedback on that. And finally, again, our public meeting will be on November 20th in the evening. We're setting the time. It's looking like it's probably going to be sometime in between 4 and 7, but we're going to nail that down once we work with the facility a little bit more. It'll be an open house format. Folks can go through the kind of order presentation that makes the most sense for them, and we'll be having a survey alongside it as well.
Madam Chair, just
Yes.
one comment from me. We have asked the consultant to come and brief you at the policy committee just before that public hearing, because there's a policy committee meeting on the Monday. And the idea is that you see the information first, so that if you have to answer questions from residents who are misunderstanding or not happy with something, you know the information before you have to answer the questions. So it'll come to you before it goes to the public meeting, but only just 2 days before. Because what happens is the newspaper grabs everything that happened in this meeting and puts it in the newspaper. So we've timed it to try to be as close to the policy committee as possible. So you see it, then the public sees it, and then of course they can write any story they want about it.
That'd be helpful. Thank you. Thank you. And does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes.
So I got a cancellation for that today. It was removed from my calendar.
The September stakeholder meeting that we're not gonna have modeling outputs for that. We just.
Where it said November 20th. Oh, this is my people, don't worry about it.
Don't cancel VDOT people coming to. And thank you to the city this time for agreeing to host us and not charging us a large fee. We appreciate that very much.
Any other comments or concerns, questions? Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And now we're moving on to travel demand model
Yes.
update.
I just want to introduce Lida. Lida worked for 5 months as an intern for us and did a fantastic job. And we've now hired her full-time as our GIS person. And so she's going to make her first presentation to you tonight, so don't be mean. And we'll hand over to Lida. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So as Ian said, this update is finished finally, and that's why we're presenting it to you right now. I'm going to go over kind of broadly what a travel demand model is, just for some background, also what's included in the update, and what we're already learning from this update. So to start, as some of you might know, a travel demand model predicts and models future travel behavior. So this is how many trips are there going to be, where are these trips going, and how are they getting there? Both which route are they taking, are people taking as they travel through the region, and also what mode of transportation are they taking? And this is a tool just used in transportation planning, which is some of you might know, it's kind of a long game, right? Like these projects take a while to complete. So this tool accounts for future travel behavior when we're making those plans that are gonna be realized in the future, and we're planning for it right now. Great. In the update, there's a couple things that were included, and considered. The first of those are kind of just general trends in travel behavior. So that's like the increase in e-commerce and working from home, also long distance commuting patterns. And additionally, there's some updates to the local or regional data that's included in the travel demand model. So updated socioeconomic figures, employment data, population data, and also just network updates. So projects that we have planned for up to 2050, which is what this model predicts out to. Those projects have been added to the network in the model. Again, to give us just a more accurate look at what travel is going to look like in our region moving forward. So this is the important slide, and this is what we've learned from the update already. As we know, this region is growing. That slide was in Ian's administrator report. People are moving here. And so with people moving here, there's going to be an increase in cars on the road. There's going to be an increase in distance being traveled, miles being traveled. Thank you to John for already talking about VMT. That worked out really well. But what's concerning is that is how these two figures kind of relate to each other. So we know that they're both going to increase. This is vehicle miles of travel and vehicle hours of travel. But as you can see how I've kind of graphed here, vehicle hours of travel is increasing at a much higher rate than vehicle miles traveled. So basically what that means is we're driving, yes, an increased distance, or there's more cars on the road, more vehicle miles of travel, but it's taking longer for that travel to happen, right? Which is concerning also when this is our full constrained long range plan build scenario. So all the projects that are already accounted for in our CLRP are built in this model. And we're still seeing this disproportionate growth between vehicle hours of travel and vehicle miles of travel.
So the key factor there, it'll take you 67% longer to do the same trip by 2050, even though we build all these expensive roadways that we're still gonna build. It's still gonna take you 67% longer to get there.
Well, yeah,
On this slide, is it what's happening in 2030 that causes the rate of change to break there?
So it's got to do with the new projects that we're going to build. We can't predict exactly which year they're going to be built in. And so that we, in the constrained long range plan, in the long range transportation plan, we break up the projects we're going to build between when we approve the plan in 2021 and 2050 in segments of like 8 or 9 or 10 years. So it just so happens that the block where the next set of projects is predicted happens at that point in the construction. It's not going to be a literal V like that.
Right, okay.
It'll be a smooth V.
It's an artifact of the assumption.
It's an artifact of the breaking the projects up into 10-year blocks.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
But the point is that starting point and the ending point are pretty accurate. It's the in-between that's just slightly different. You will spend 67% more time on the road than you do now to do the same trip to the same store, even if we build all these roadway improvements, and that's the concern. But carry on, sorry.
Yes, so this is looking at our region in the future. This next slide kind of gives you a bit of context for our region compared to other ones, with some data that John pulled for me, John. But this is talking about where we rank both nationally and in Virginia for traffic per freeway lane. And you can see here, in Virginia, we're #1 above Washington, DC, looking at, again, that traffic per freeway lane daily average. And we're ranked 4th in the nation, with just or regions in California and Texas ranking above us.
So think about that for a second. We are the 4th worst in the country for the number of vehicles per lane, right? Now, of course, the data is 2022, so Marcy Parker's team will have opened up the new bridge northbound. So it will have given a little relief because you've got a couple extra lanes now that you didn't have when that number was calculated, but it's not going to be a whole lot better. Maybe we go from the 4th in the country to the 6th or something, but still to be in the top 10 number of vehicles per lane on the road is severe.
and this takes into consideration teleworking and all that.
Just counts. They just count the cars right now on the road. It's not based on any kind of knowledge of the vehicle.
And I mean, you're also taking the interstate traffic as far as long distance, truck traffic, that kind of stuff there's nothing we can do about that, right?
I don't think we should
trains,
look at the
Yeah,
DMV per capita because we've got an unusually small population for the amount of traffic we have. So that number is a bit artificial. We are ignoring that number. It's artificial. But what's not artificial is the number of vehicles per lane mile. That is comparable with anywhere else in the world. So that is the number to worry about, that 21,448 trips per lane mile daily. That's very high. And as I said, it'll be a little bit down now because we've added extra lanes on that northbound bridge. But apart from that, it's still going to be high.
Chris,
Then doesn't this argue for more local connections? Because all we're doing is using the interstate as our local road.
Yes.
So, ta-da, there you go.
Do
I'll never
not,
get on 95.
do not just keep adding lanes onto I-95. Long term, that's not a sustainable solution. It's a very bad solution.
Right, but my point was that there is some element of 95 that you're never gonna get away from.
Correct.
And that is those people that are traveling, multi-state type things or transit, or not
I
transit,
think
but
Bob,
truck traffic.
I think Bob called it the I-95, the intercontinental ballistic superhighway or something at some point. That's the problem. It's
Janet.
not gonna go away. It goes from Miami up to Canada.
Right, it's always gonna be there.
Again, back to the point of if you add more lanes, you're inducing demand. You're actually encouraging others. Right now, everyone knows leave, if you're traveling through, leave at 5 a.m. Don't come on a Saturday. Like enough people know, don't do it. So you're actually creating the problem forces behavior to shift in different ways. I'm never on, I avoid like the plague from Woodbridge to Fredericksburg on I-95. I take Route 17.
Yeah,
Like those are behavioral shifts that occur because of that. So those are things that you'll continue to do, and no matter. It's the second it becomes more efficient, guess what? People go, "Oh, I'll just leave, I can, instead of leaving at 3:30 in the morning to get through Fredericksburg on a Saturday, I can now leave at 5:30 and all your congestion just shows up. So no matter how hard VDOT works, people are going to adjust their behavior to convenience. And that's one of the things you will always chase as long as you have an interstate rolling through.
okay.
So I guess I was wondering if it's most, you're referencing 95, but then how does that make sense when Richmond is 176? Like that's 95, 60, you know what I'm saying? Like, and we're fourth and Washington DC is 65th. So like, it's not
So
like that.
the reason is we only have one interstate highway. Richmond has multiple heading out from the circle, right? You've got
Right.
64,
64,
95, you've got,
295.
we don't.
Right.
We don't. So we have a narrow space. We're called the worst bottleneck in Virginia because of this. We have a narrow space with very few ways to get over the river and north and south, whereas Richmond has multiple access points. DC has multiple access points. And remember, this is vehicles per lane mile. So when you've got lots of miles, it doesn't matter that you've got lots of vehicles. When you've got few lane miles, it
And that's-
matters that you've got lots of vehicles. So we're trying to push the same number of vehicles that they're getting in Richmond, but through a narrower gap, if I can sort of artificially explain that.
This isn't just 95.
No,
So it's
not,
Wait, I thought it was.
no,
No, there's no
Freeway lane.
interstate in Lynchburg.
no.
Okay,
No.
so
It's not just.
Everything.
Okay, but for our purposes, if we're only counting, this is only talking about traffic on 95.
No.
No,
Route 3 qualifies, if it's a limited access facility, it will count, so that little portion of Route 3 where it becomes limited access.
From like Lafayette to the bridge, all right.
So. You have the on ramps where you don't have at grade, like some nice intersections.
well, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if does this, I mean, it strikes me as a sort of a limitation for our purposes that this is only talking about freeway lane miles, right? I mean, is there a version of this data that includes a wider range of roads? Just because, I mean, the FAMPO policy committee is not gonna fix 95. Like,
What does it look like? You have that, daily traffic. I
wanna know how-
DMV per capita is kind of getting into the whole network. Like I was pulling, you can see where I'm starting to pull the same.
Right, okay, thank you.
Don't get into per capita. It's a bad way to judge this region because we have a small population with a lot of traffic. So it becomes a distorted. We could end up becoming number one in the country, and it's not a true reflection of the problem, right? Because the population is small relative to amount of trucks and cars coming through the region. So don't bother about that metric. Stick to the lane mile, but we can get you data with all roadways.
Okay.
So we can get
Okay, that,
just
yeah.
don't have it now, and I don't want to.
Yeah, that would be, I think that would be helpful to have that data.
Yeah. Because the other roadways that we are making decisions.
So all lane miles.
like.
Great, we'll get it.
Sure.
Moving on.
Okay,
Sorry.
so both of these slides, this one and the one looking at BMT and VHT increases in the region are our travel behavior models projections and currently as they are. But something else to consider is also how does our plan fit in with growing, with inflation for infrastructure construction costs? Infrastructure inflation. Yeah, so again, that travel demand model with the growing VHT and VMT is our CLRP's full build scenario. So all the projects that are in our constrained long range plan have funding identified for them. But that plan was last updated at this point in time with the cost index for highway construction. So you can see since then, it's grown considerably.
Did you hear that? We finished our long range transportation plan and updated the CLRP, the constrained long range plan, at that dip in the inflation graph there. And now the construction, this is construction inflation on the National Highway Construction Cost Index. We are now paying up there at the top of that graph for new roadways and new infrastructure. So we think we're going to build all those things in the CLRP. We're going to have to find a lot more money if we want to build all of those things. Anyway,
Yes, and we know we should build all of them because the travel demand model is predicting this, you know, extreme increase in VHT relative to VNT. So that's basically where we want to introduce you all to this project. We've kind of come up with here at FAMPO, Project FINA, which is a future integrated network analysis. And this is something, an analysis that we do in-house, like just FAMPO staff. But once we get the travel demand model update and are trained in how to use it, we'll be evaluating where it's predicting congestion to be the worst in our region, and also look at the projects that are planned. How are they addressing congestion, or where are they falling short, so that we can figure out if we're getting behind and also how to best address this growing congestion. So already on the schedule, we have a travel demand model training with both the model developer and VDOT scheduled at the end of October. And then we can start to actually use this as a tool to problem solve.
Great,
well done.
awesome, thank you so much. Does anybody have, oh, Chris?
I have one question. So, and if we've already covered this and I'm just not following along, do all these models, do they sort of break out? Because the interstate is kind of skewing what is going on. So it's almost like through traffic and then local traffic. And we have lots of commuters, so that also skews what's going on too. And I'm not trying to be mean to anybody that commutes or I-95 people at all, but that's a different problem than getting around in between the city and Stafford and Spotsy to go shopping, meet your friends, play soccer, whatever it is that you do. So how do we separate those two things? Because it looks really bad that our, hours skyrocket. But if that's just 95, that's a whole thing that we can't fix here. So, but we can actually address the local stuff.
So
That makes sense?
It does.
the model has already done the work for us. We just got to learn how to interpret it, because that's a science. And so we're doing training on October the 30th, and we're going to produce a map. And that's how we answer your question, because the map will show using colors and sizes of roads and all that. Roads are seeing the most congestion, which roads are seeing the most traffic. And we put it up on a map like we've done in the past. So you'll be able to just look in one glance on the screen, see where the problem is, because you'll see the I-95 is separated. Each other road is its own line on the map. And you can then see which are the red ones. And the red ones are the ones to worry about, because they're having an excess growth in traffic. And the preliminary view seems to be, John's the expert on looking at those numbers, but he's saying to me that it looks like a lot of the local roads are in trouble. So we will rather bring you proper information, but our first glance at the results coming out of the new travel demand model is that our local roads are in trouble. We're going to be gridlocked by 2050 on those, but not all the same, right? So this one's going to be bad, that one not so bad, and we'll bring you a map to show you where the points are. And the map has already got built into it all of the projects in our long range plan. So it assumes that we haven't built them now, but we will build them before 2050. And so we can show you now, and we can show you 2050, and you can compare those two and go, oh, that solves the problem, or no, that actually doesn't solve the problem. Maybe we're doing the wrong project.
Okay.
Anybody else? Oh, Meg?
So the other thing that's kind of changed the numbers is where we used to have 18,000 riders per day on VRE, now we're at 500. Okay, depending on the week, it could be 6,200. But a lot of those people are not taking the train. They used to take the train 5 days a week, and now they're only working maybe 2 days a week. and they'll say, okay, I'll drive in one day, maybe I'll slug the other day. So there are all kinds of different options going on out there as it relates to 95.
Right. Anyone else have anything? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lita, and thank you, John, for doing that.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, I'll be really quick on this new Post River crossing discussion. So our board had a discussion regarding looking into an additional river crossing at New Post, which would be so we're kind of bringing this to you to just take the temperature of how you all would feel about potentially studying that at some point. You know, we all know that we need multiple river crossings, right? I mean, the one that we're looking at right now is not going to be enough. And we have traffic that is coming south on Route 2 that is basically clogging up 2, and then it clogs up the Blue-Gray Parkway, and then it clogs up Route 3, and they kind of wiggle around to get back to 95 at some point in time. Particularly in the summer, that's the case, or if there's an incident on 95. So our board, we kind of took a vote to say that we all feel that this might be something that we would like to bring to the policy committee and see if how you all feel about looking at an additional river. This isn't in lieu of what we're looking at. This is in addition to what we're looking at. So we just kind of wanted to take the temperature of the policy committee and see how what you all felt about it. It would be a study.
I guess that's directed at Stafford, so.
I'm gonna go get coffee at this point. Caroline. I'll just go coffee. I'll just go, you know,
Well, I mean, I
So-
think it's all, it's got pros and cons to every single one of these things, right? So we just have to weigh it out.
So, I mean, basically, if I understand you, and this traffic that you're talking about actually comes
Yeah.
right up Blue-Gray Parkway,
Yeah.
people go down, Cool Springs Road, or
Yeah.
they go down,
Somewhere.
White Oak Road. And then it all cuts over onto Butler Road, and that's why Dunkin' Donuts, Dunkin' Donuts right there by Arby's on Route 17, they said it's to catch all the traffic coming off of Route 2. It's the only reason they built it there. So basically you would have, I mean, if you want my opinion, it makes sense to put those cars on a 4-lane road versus a 2-lane road, unless you're planning on expanding Route 2 in the future.
Well, there is a
Because-
plan for that.
Okay, well.
It's incredibly pricey. I'm sorry.
Right, it is, yeah, it
So,
is.
I mean, for me to sit here and say, no, I don't want to study it, no, I think that would be ridiculous as an elected official. So I think that, if FAMPO wants to study it and look at what the options are, I think that makes sense.
I mean,
I
I was just gonna say that, we have so much development that is occurring, right? Just development is coming. And, I believe, Drew and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that is on our comprehensive plan as sort of a concept crossing right now. Doesn't mean, it's gonna happen, but there's not a ton out there right now. It'd be kind of nice to be forethinking on this stuff before we get boxed in because somebody's gonna put up something. But yeah, Monica.
Yeah, when this came out and I read about it, that you all were looking at this, it doesn't make sense in my mind. Obviously, you all are coming from a different perspective. But I did also share the information with Supervisor Davis, that it was okay. Maybe that's why he came here and then he did leave. He had another meeting to go to or something. And so we had discussed it previously, and I know that he does not support it, and that would be dropping into his district. So on top of my perspective, I just wanted to share that as well. I thought that was important. So I think at this time, it's not something that I would
Well, I appreciate your input on that. Drew?
Yeah, I think it's like, we're looking at the back end of the elephant, and you guys are looking at the trunk kind of thing, so it always looks different.
The front end.
But, when
I've heard that.
we're regionally talking about river crossings, right? Just generally speaking, from far west to wherever. The challenge is, as we keep developing, all the viable crossing points start getting built on, so this area just so happens right now geographically presents opportunity to kind of look at things open-minded. And I think that the only way we're looking at it is like, what's the pros and cons, that kind of thing, and what does it, through a study, what kind of things manifest themselves or materialize that maybe we're not thinking about right now, that present solutions to north-south movement. So that's kind of like the genesis of the idea, or part of it anyways.
Right.
Well,
So, Lori,
oh, yeah.
so it's. I mean, really, it's gonna put pressure on Route 3 out by Walmart. That's what it's gonna do.
Mhm.
Where would the crossing be? How far out?
Just what, a mile or two down from there, a couple miles down?
Oh, down there? Okay.
Yeah.
So the Renaissance Fair. So the rest of the roads aren't gonna change. Where you come up by Ferry Farm,
Right.
Springs Road, all that's the same.
Mhm.
So really, you're just pushing the traffic from Route 2 from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road.
Yeah, I think,
But I would
Sure.
agree with Supervisor Banuch that, when you're saying, we need to be open-minded, I agree that I think you guys need to be open-minded about the big river crossing over here on 17.
Mhm.
So,
Well, as being the one open-minded supervisor from Swansea on that. No offense, you guys weren't there. But the point to this, I think, is to look at what this would affect. And one of the things that really opened my eyes to this is there's a project on Lafayette, and I won't say where because it's not been put forward yet. And they did a study on basically 4 Mile Fork out through Lafayette to Blue Gray, because we were trying to find projects that this could help facilitate, transportation projects. And what they found, and my reading of it was that people were using Lafayette as sort of an overflow for Route 1 because the traffic light gets backed up. So it's an alternate road, but they're not taking Lafayette and turning off of Lafayette. It's a through road for them. So if you can take that traffic that's using that as a through, give it an alternate route to go that avoids the city. Now we have avoided, or we enhance Lafayette, we enhance Blue Gray because you're taking that traffic and pushing it this way. Not all of it, but a lot of it will go that way. Cool Springs Road and Ferry Farm, that whole area. Those folks that come through there and then decide which way did we go? Do we go up? Do we go over to Route 1, come down, Falmouth, that all? Here's another way for you to get around, which is why I supported the river crossing in Celebrate, Virginia. Because that takes that pressure off of the other roads, because we need alternate ways to go. And all that we were asking is to throw this in the hopper when we can fund some study money for it. It's in our long range plan, but there's always an asterisk there saying with Stafford's consent, we were not going to just build a road and say, hey, by the way, because obviously you can't do that. And we need to work together on these things. And the other issue that comes up too, is that if they look at that area, it might actually move into Caroline because there might not be wetlands and you got Belvedere out there. And then you got, a lot of, topographical issues that you run into. So we might have to involve Caroline in this. So it's a larger discussion that I think is, once the river crossing is done, once Harrison might be done, the big guys are done. This is the next one that we're throwing in there to keep it moving.
right. So if I can just,
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with you that, we have to look comprehensively at the whole region. And it's all about who's moving where. It's exactly what you discussed. And that's why, I can't say that I wouldn't support studying it, because I think it's our responsibility to look at the whole region as a planning organization. I mean, I would be, did Supervisor Diggs, because I do respect his opinion, did he indicate why he didn't want to support it?
I don't remember the specifics, so I wouldn't wanna try and
Okay,
refer the tape, whatever, was I never heard
Yeah.
that, but that he was very adamant, not. So maybe if some of that conversation did happen. Those kind of things, but, I agree with you that we do need to look comprehensively at the region, that's why I'm in support of the RTA, these are the kind of things that we can look at a bigger picture and get funding for. Not to make a plug, but it really does kind of tie into that. That's the direction we're going, whether we like it or not, we have to sell it. So.
Chris?
If I might suggest that without Supervisor Diggs here, we can push this to the next meeting, get his input and let him, ask the questions, because I don't want to force it on anybody and I do want people to be on board as much as they possibly can. And so if he has questions or concerns, they can be raised and answered, and then we can move forward.
Right.
Because it's not gonna get funding between now and next
And,
month
and,
anyway.
and look, and I just want to be really clear too, because when that discussion was, when I brought it up to our board, Chris was like, okay, what is this? You kind of pushed on, we're not shoving this down anybody's throat. And I was like, no, not at all. I mean, I think it's just a concept that is in our long range plan that we wanted to bring to the policy committee to get the feedback. We certainly wouldn't do anything that would offend you to the point that you'd be like, no way. I mean, we're not gonna operate in that way, but it is something that I think deserves discussion, and we can certainly pull it off. And Will, I know you had your hand up.
Just a question for Mr. Allis and Ms. Hinkle. Is this the kind of question that your new travel demand model can give us at least some preliminary answers to? Sort of a full study? Was this one of the early questions we can pose to that model and say, to what extent does it help us solve problems elsewhere versus what extent doesn't it? Because, turns out nobody actually really lives out there.
So it's a yes or no answer. The model currently does not have that bridge built into it.
Okay.
However, we do a mini internal study. We can ask the VDOT people who actually own the model to add a project there to run the model and give us the outputs. And once Lida and John have done the training as to how to operate a thing called Cube software, don't go there, it's a very long story. We can then show you what the result looks like, but it is very high level. Just understand that this is not going to give you micro traffic simulations and all the stuff that you do in a proper study. All it's going to do is tell you the likely number of cars that will use it, what its effect will be on the surrounding roads in terms of congestion. That's all it will tell you. It's not a full study, it's just a model run. And of course, it doesn't cost us much. If you do a proper study, then we have to pay for it.
Right.
And we don't right today, this very minute, have the money to pay for it. But we could do just a model run. But then you just must understand that all that it is a model run that's interpreted. It's not a full study.
Listen, I mean, I think I might, personally speaking, be interested in that if it means not expending. Might answer Supervisor Yakovetsky's question, right? Is this actually a solution for Route 1 or for Lafayette Boulevard? It might not be, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe nobody really wants to go that far out of their way. Who knows? Right?
Well, it can tell you what is likely to happen to Route 3 and Route 2, right? Those are key questions you want to know. But it's a very basic, it's just a model run. It's not a study. A study involves a lot more than just running the model. There is a micro simulation which tells you what the traffic lights will do to that, and
Shannon,
very high level.
Shannon, you had a,
I guess I also think we need to look regionally. That makes sense, of course. But I am also curious about stretching our staff really thin. Like, what is this gonna do to our staff resources to do the high level model that you just talked about? Okay,
So,
but like beyond that, like,
just for a model run, actually VDOT's going to do all the hard work because they've got to code that model. and the model runs overnight for like 2 days before it puts out the results. John and Lida will be able to interpret that model once we get the Cube software to work on our machine. And they've been to the training on October the 30th. We'll be able to then interpret that model and make a map for you. It's not a huge lift.
Okay.
But if you want to do the proper study, that's a different animal. That involves all kinds of additional things, which we won't do quickly. That will take a lot of staff time. But
That's what I wanted.
just programming the model, running the model, and interpreting the results, it just gives you a very, very high level. And it may, and I must just warn you before you start this, that it may not tell you what you want to hear. That's the one thing you just have to remember. It
Well,
may tell you.
Want to know if this is worth,
Pursuing.
if there's anything of value here.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's the goal, and I think, certainly we want to be respectful of, Deontay's, district and that sort of thing, so we'll just push this off, and can we put it on the agenda for next month
Yeah.
then? And we'll let him know for sure that we're gonna talk about it,
For sure.
and that way he can weigh in on that. Certainly, our intention is not to offend, it's just to try and come up with some items. Okay, so if we're done with that, we're gonna, anybody else have any?
Just a comment from me that we as staff welcome regional cooperation, so long may it continue.
Okay, and next thing is safe streets and roads for all. Grant partial award announcement.
Becky, is she stepped out?
She's right here.
I just can't see. Okay, never mind. I'll just do this. We, in the absence of Becky, we've received a partial award. So we applied for a Safe Streets for All planning grant and an implementation grant. And the federal government has approved only a planning grant. They have not approved the implementation grant. And even the planning grant, they've only approved 3 projects out of I think there were 5. And the 3 that they've picked to approve the funding for are in Spotsylvania. So Drew River Road is one of those 3 where there'll be a safety study on that road and 2 other roads in Spotsylvania. So we've spoken to the county and, oh, here you are. Sorry, in your absence, I was.
Doing a great job. I was trying to need us.
So, yeah, the county is very happy to accept the partial award for the study. And so we have responded to the federal government to say, yes, we would accept a partial award. And I believe we're going to, in the next couple of days, get a contract from the federal government for the money. So that's where it's a pity we didn't get the portion that would have covered Caroline County, and it's a pity we didn't get the portion that covered implementation grants in multiple FAMPO jurisdictions, but you take, I think, what you get at the moment. So that's what we were offered.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any comments on that? We're good, okay. Let's move on to staff and agency reports. Reminder of VDOT statewide update to the federal functional classification.
That's, Mr. Hollis warned you about that, or advised you about that we have a deadline to get requested changes to the functional classification, by the end of this month. VDOT has to review those requests to see if their, system agrees with them. We've received a great list from, Spotsylvania County, and, looking for staff of the project.
And I guess that's Spotsylvania County's requested updates, is that right there?
Is that list? What happens now is VDOT checks that they agree with us, right? So they may say, okay, we agree with some, but number 10, we don't agree with.
Okay,
And so they will review those.
There will be a resolution that comes back to the policy committee, in some time frame to approve those changes.
Yeah, you'll vote for them once we have
Okay.
the VDOT review.
and when did you need Stafford and Fredericksburg's input on that?
In September, so please, before the end of the
Okay,
month.
so you guys will get
Yeah.
people to, okay, awesome.
If you don't have any changes, then just say that.
Okay. All right, and then we're on to board member and chair comments. So anyone have any comments, concerns?
Just want to remind everybody, I believe it's Wednesday night.
DRPA is having their public hearing on the Leland Bridge.
Correct.
Next Wednesday night, the 25th, we're having a public hearing on Route 1 Augustine. It'll be at Hugh Mercer Elementary School. And then October 9th, there will be another public hearing for the bundle of projects there at 4 Mile Fort. And where's that one?
That's in Spotswood.
Spotswood Elementary. So those are our 3 meetings before our next board meeting, in case anybody cares to attend or
That's a
fill out the
lot.
survey.
You
Don't
guys-
fill out the survey, please.
If you guys pop me a reminder email, I'll ask, well, actually, they're right here. Eugene's right there. Eugene can put on our social media a reminder.
Yes, I
Um,
asked him to do whatever you do on Facebook
Yeah.
to like move on forward,
So-
whatever.
So
The Augustine one.
Eugene will push them on social
I don't use
media
this.
for you all.
Will you push the surveys then?
Yeah.
As well, and you guys will push out surveys and we can,
Correct, they're on our posts. You
okay,
know, we put a survey.
So if VDOT puts it on their feed, we can
Yeah.
just.
all right,
copy and
now
paste.
we'll,
So you'll-
I'll share.
And you'll get it to the members, to us? Is that what you're saying?
No,
They'll share it
put it on social.
Share it.
media.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
VDOT should be sending the members all of that stuff directly. They should have your
I
email.
believe y'all are on our
Distribution.
I just-
distribution. Yes, and then they just reminded me on October 17th.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
I
I'm
don't think I
either.
am.
Okay, we'll make sure that.
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't.
On October 17th, there's a public hearing on the Canal Bridge on Route 1 in the city that's right there near Mary Washington Hospital. So at Monroe High School.
Awesome.
Get
Four.
Very busy.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Drew,
No, it
you're
was-
good, okay.
Covered it, yep.
All right, so if no one else has anything, then,
Motion to adjourn.
all right,
Second.
all those in favor?
There we go. Short meeting.
Oh my God.
Not bad.